Shifting gears to Standard newspaper front page story, demolitions on grabbed airport land set to start. Of course, this preempting the direct flights to the U.S. happening in 9 days. And of course, a lot of owners of land in that area crying foul. The thing is, someone gave certificates to allow for these structures to come up in the first place. So really quickly here, security personnel at KAA have already ringed warehouses sitting on land excised for the Kenya Airports from the Kenya Airports Authority. Demolition set to start before direct flights to New York in a week. This will be the second time buildings are brought down around the country's main airport. So 220 acres is the size of land that KAA wants to reclaim. 50 is the number of warehouses that will be pulled down within 10 days. It seems, Mr. Kirwa, that there's always some reactionary action when it comes to things like this. We knew that the direct flights to the US was coming. 9 days to this is happening. What do you make of all of this?
Well, I think the bureaucratic regime of any system delays some actions, because I would have expected that 2 years ago, as a way of preparing for these direct flights, because we've been talking about it for quite some time, they should have been able to ease the way for this to be done. Number two, it worries me because people were given permits. I hope it was temporary occupation license, which means they were supposed to set up temporary structures, and when called upon to ease themselves out of the way, it will be minimal in terms of cost. But when you look at some of those go downs, billions of shillings have been used to construct them. Either people thought the law will not catch up with them, like building on a road reserve with the hope that one day, if it comes, it will come when I'm already out of this world. And therefore, you are leaving your children with a lot of challenges. So my worry is that decisions in future should be taken on the basis of longevity, not on the basis of what can I get out of this situation at this particular time. But more important, I would have expected this to have been done much earlier. Otherwise, why are you doing demolitions? Are you going to clear the debris? Are you going to ease the way and avoid a situation where there could be dangerous chemicals or even materials on the safety of those who are supposed to fly that particular corridor?
No, absolutely. A lot needs to be considered as this process continues. One person who will be, or one institution that will be affected is Western Hotel, which we know, of course, is owned by Deputy President William Ruto. Now, his lawyer, Ahmed Nasir Abdullahi, appeared before the National Lands Commission to defend his acquisition of the plot on Langata Road, even as he questioned the jurisdiction of NLC to determine its ownership. Now, NLC has written to Western Hotel to appear before it to defend its documents following the petition from KCAA. What will happen in this case, in your view, Honorable Manzo? Will we see the coming down of Western Hotel? It survived a lot, I must say. It has survived quite a lot up until this point. But what do you make of this?
Yeah, first of all, on the land and the demolitions around the JKA, you know, as you fly to the airport, you can see structures which can actually be used by dangerous people and bring down a plane and cause a lot of deaths. So we must, and all people who are located airport land, they knew very well at all material times that that land belonged to the government, and also they went with monies to bribe and collude with the people, you know, or use power with the people in power then to acquire this land, and after that hoped that they will have a sanctified title. I think not just because of our flights to New York, and I know the Americans, we are going to reciprocate with Delta Airlines or any other airlines from the US. They are very careful on security. You can even see how they are careful before anybody boards that plane. And they want their planes to be safe when they come to Kenya. And we also want our Kenyan planes to be safe, and I hope we are going to get our 777s back, because you know those are the planes which can be able to cruise non-stop and carry cargo, and we will be in good trade as a country. So when it comes to also to Western Hotel, there is now a lawyer on record. The Constitution allows the National Land Commission to do that sort of thing, but it should not be used politically, because we also know there are politics in it. It should not be used politically. It should be by law. And one of the things which a person is allowed to do is to make good. You know, instead of doing destruction just for the sake of it, the processes involve many people. It involved the Minister of Lands then. Those days, the grant title of the country was with the President. There was the Commissioner of Lands. So we have to look at the whole matter in totality, so that you just don't destroy property to inflict pain. And so long as that particular property is not on the pathway and is not offending any law, then I think people should be given an opportunity to be able to make good. And in the worst case scenario, where it turns out truly is you have stolen land from the public, then of course the demolitions have to follow and the consequences. Because everyone who obtained public land, they knew one day it must go back to the public.
And Gabriel, the headline adjacent to this, Ruto used Western title to borrow 1.2 billion shillings. And you know, you're wondering, these are assets, even though it's built on land that is in question, individuals still use it to, of course, maybe acquire land elsewhere or other properties. But what do you make of that?
And by the way, Vicky, it's not only that. I know so many people who've used land that, you know, is not clearly well defined. You know, people talk about land that's not clean. I know so many people who've used their titles to get money from banks. It's not only the DP himself alone. There are so many people. And if you look at how that came to being, I'll agree with what Mheshimiwa is saying. At one point, probably, did this person know that that land belongs to government? So there are two things that must come out very clearly. One, did they know? Secondly, we cannot address this issue of land and demolitions without holding people who gave those approvals accountable. You see, over the past 1 year, the thing that I've narrowed so close has been that you are actually dealing with people who bought finished products. When I say finished products, I'm talking about finished houses. Somebody who comes and he is told, you know, Victoria, we are selling a go down here. And you look for money, you look, you know, give all the paperwork to your lawyer, they go and they do the stuff, and they tell you, you know what, this is clean. But you are the third person buying it. So the first person who bought it already made their money and probably left, like the apartments that are supposed to be brought down. These are the Chinese people who came, did what they did. I don't know who they bribed, if that was the case. And then guess what? The person who went ahead to buy the finished product, which was an apartment, has no idea, has no clue. But guess what? He's the one now to wage the problem alone. So when you go to the issue of land and demolition and the whole 9 yards about security, the airport, you know, locality, the thing that must come to play is, did these people have prior knowledge that this was public? And if they did, then like they say, beba mzigo yako, you know, then the law has to take its course. But again, we still cannot address it without holding the people who gave out these approvals accountable. I don't care how old they are. You know, people said, oh, they retired. No. Accountability does not stop when you retire. It must still follow you to, you know, to places that you went. Coming to the issue of security, and I know this is going to be an issue. If we do not sort our mess, I can guarantee you the reciprocal, probably the flight, may not be allowed to come in, and then we are going to lose on that. And like you put it very well, again, we had all this time to, you know, to maneuver this around. Why didn't we do it? So again, we are playing catch up, which I don't think it's quite nice. That route we are talking about, Nairobi, New York, as you know, that is a serious security pipeline. And again, you're talking about lifting people from Africa, from Kenya, you know, given the fact that, you know, our borders and everything, you know, and flying into New York. Again, we cannot fail to talk about what happened in New York in September 11th. So they still have that mentality. Are we going to be, you know, people who are very security conscious given that route? And I think if we don't step up to the plate, I think we may see some issues coming in or digging into this issue.
I want to follow up really quickly on the issue of land acquisition because, like you mentioned, Gabriel, someone who's buying what you said, finished product, has no idea the paper trail. So, and you know, people say due diligence, you know, do your homework, make sure, but it's not always foolproof. But from your perspective, Mr. Kira, what should people do to safeguard themselves from instances process like this?
Yeah, you know, you cannot sell what you don't have. And therefore, if I'm buying property from you, it means that it is my responsibility to make sure that it is yours before I buy. And if it is yours, how did you acquire it? But if I say I bought it from Victoria, and therefore you excuse me because I did not know, of course lawyers know that in terms of contractual, it is voidable because you are selling what does not belong to you legally. And therefore, I should not even have bought from you, or I should have been more careful not to buy from you. Now, but I have this feeling that we should look at each and every issue in isolation, because some of the issues, let's say I built a house on your piece of land, and now we go to court. After some time, it is proven that it was your piece of land. Now, what does it mean? I've been using it for the last 20 years, and the land was yours. Now, am I going to compensate you in terms of in lieu, or are you going to take over the building that I erected on the structure, or are we going to demolish? My honest opinion is that if, let's say, Western, the land that Western is sitting on, belongs to Kenya Airports Authority, whoever bought it, or if the DP bought it from somebody, that person should be held responsible. And therefore, for the period that the DP has been using, he should pay the government. And at the end of the time, we should also compensate him for the structure that he has erected, and probably hand over to the rightful owner of the land the property that he has erected on that piece. So my take is that let's be careful. Don't buy what does not belong to the seller.
In fact, legally, you know, there is a phrase always that buyer be aware. At all material times, a buyer must be aware of what they're doing. You have lawyers. So at times you must assume the risk. Knowing very well that the land is stolen land, or you have stolen it, you now know the risk that one day it may be brought down. But if you look at what happened with the Kamlesh Patton and the Lyco Regency, eventually now the government claimed it back. So I'm saying in the worst case scenario, let's not just destroy properties for the sake of it, or to inflict pain. I'm sure, you know, KAA needs also investments, and this particular land, from my experience with the Wilson Airport, is not, there are no planes which fly above it or very close to it. And therefore, in the worst case scenario, then, compensate him, and then claim now the hotel, other than just coming with a green mamba and bringing it down, crashing every plate you find there. There's no notice. You know, people just wake up one day and...
Victoria, you know, it's not as easy as we think, because, I mean, look at your case. Assuming you are a first-time home buyer, and I'm talking about the issue about Western. I'm talking about buildings that we know may come down, like the you know, people are talking about what are they called? Something apartments. If you look at a place like that, Vicky, and I'm saying, assuming you're a first-time home buyer, what other due diligence can you do? This person has a title deed, and you know it has a sanctity. We all know the sanctity of the title deed. He has all approvals, NEMA, WARMA, everything. Where else will you go?
Right.
No, look at it that way. As a first-time home buyer, you've put in a lawyer, and the bank has approved your loan, meaning they've also done their due diligence. So where else? Which other government organ would you go to ensure that the documents you have are clean? And every institution that you've gone, every institution mandated by law to give these approvals have already done so. So you are left holding the end of the tail, wondering, okay, now my investment is coming down. Where do I go? Where do I go? And I think the issue of compensation, this is where it must come in. And guess what? If we are talking about compensation, Victoria, that's why I said you cannot address this issue of demolition without properly addressing and holding to account the people who give fake approvals. Because at the end of the day, you also do not want to entertain a legality just because somebody was corrupted. Because if we do that, then the entire Nairobi, people will build in the middle of the roads because, somebody gave them an approval, which is an illegality in the first place. So I think it is a very, we should treat this matter with the respect and the honesty that it deserves. Right.
What does this mean for investor confidence? Because you're thinking someone outside of the country seeing a headline like this are scared out of their wits. The green mamba is there, and they're thinking, I'm putting my money into something I think it's a worthy investment, but it could come down. Despite what you were saying, due diligence, different bodies having given you certificates and whatnot and permits. How much more can you do? And
again, Vicky, okay, now put yourself again in the shoes of an investor. Because you, as an investor, you still have to go to these bodies. And when you go, somebody will tell you, okay, yeah, we will clear this, we've cleared this, we've cleared this, we've cleared this. 10 years later, you are told you build on government land or you build on
some reserve somewhere,
While all along, you and your great investment were told you are okay. So the issue we still need to query is, are these departments that are mandated by law to give these approvals, are they ever serious?
Have they been compromised?
That's the other thing.
You know, Victoria, this is where there is a clash between formal institutions and informal institutions. Where informal institutions for this case is the norms, the traditions, and the behavior of our society. And therefore, we need to go to the foundation of this problem. First of all, the way Gabriel has said, get hold of the person who gave the approval. But ultimately, the government also, because that was a government officer, must of necessity compensate me for putting me in a situation where I trusted the government because it is my government, and I trusted something that was not really worth trusting. So the government ought to compensate, then pursue the victim, or the villain, who gave approvals when he should not have given approvals. Otherwise, if we were to dilly-dally with this particular issue, we'll be continuing with impunity.
Right.
Because now properties have been destroyed, like the West End, some petrol stations in Lavington, and many other places. Now, where are we going to stop and where are we going to begin? So the best thing is, let us compensate the victims that never intended to do that, but also we must do it according to the law.
Yes, you know, there is the innocent buyer and there is a fraudster who know very well this property belongs to the government, sells it. Because even when you are processing those documents in those days with the commissioner of lands, and then they will go to the president for approval. And the president was very careful before approving anything. He had to trust the commissioner. And now the commissioner and his officers have been corrupted. So the person who corrupted the commissioner and the commissioner, both of them are guilty. And if you corrupted the commissioner and then sold the property to an innocent buyer, I think there is a reason to compensate that particular innocent buyer and the bank. Although, you know, loans are insured, it means the insurance will also suffer unnecessarily, or a loss which, even if it was insured for, is being calculated. Some people are guilty. So I believe the whole matter has to be looked in totality, and each title should be looked at in circumstances where, you know, changes can be made for the common good. I believe it should also be encouraged, because if a building is not directly on the flight path, and it is difficult to change the flight path, and for the safety of other Kenyans also aboard airplanes and our relationships with other international traders, we have to really look at the matter very objectively, where a law has been broken. Of course, that particular person must suffer the consequences. So that it is also a caution to all of us as Kenyans. Before you steal a property of the state, you must know that one day you will lose it.